to record it. Okay, this is Sterling Harwood with Marita Grudzen, and we're doing seminar 4 of 5 in our William James seminar. And I've turned the volume up more because when I reviewed the YouTube playbacks for seminars 1 and 2, the volume seemed to be a bit low for me, but I'll also try to boost the volume out of my mouth too, get my lungs more into it. And then seminar 3 of 5 is lost to history, but we know what we did, so we can reconstruct it at some point, either with Marita or another student. We can go over the same quotations that we went over. We know which quotations we went over, and we're going to go over more quotations now. But I thought we'd start with Marita, who's she's at first said she probably wouldn't have time to read out of Varieties of Religious Experience this summer because she's got such a busy schedule, but she managed to get some reading done. And then I didn't do it because she wasn't going to do it, so I didn't go back and reread it. So she's better prepared for this particular point. And Marita, you said you found something out about how James was misinterpreting Saint Teresa of Avila.
Yes, yes, I did.
And all posterity what happened, and then I'll bone up on it after class today, and then I'll be ready to contribute my 2 cents to that in seminar 5.
Good. So I send you an email about my concerns about his interpretation of her.
No, I thought we'd put it on the record this week.
Oh,
and
all right.
I may not have a whole lot to say because I didn't know that you had found that discrepancy until right a couple of minutes before class started. So what I'm suggesting is, why don't you tell us what you found? Because I didn't think you'd be finding anything because you had told me you weren't going to have time to read the book this week, but you managed to find the time. And then I didn't read the book this week because I didn't think you were going to read. I thought we were just going to focus on the quote. So what I'm suggesting is I'll be up to speed for next week once I hear what you have to say this week. But while it's fresh in your mind, why don't we get it on the record while we're recording this discrepancy you found between William James's interpretation of Saint Teresa of Avila and the real Saint Teresa of Avila that he should have interpreted correctly. So why don't you tell us what you can about that? And it puts her in a bad light, you said. So I can contribute that much, relaying it from you. But why don't you tell us what you found and maybe which lecture you found it in, if you remember. And then I'll look it up after the seminar today, and then I'll be ready to put in my 2 cents about it in seminar 5 of 5.
Okay, well, I read it actually about a week ago, and I did not refresh it in my memory just before this.
Well, whatever you can, whatever
I will, yes, but I will describe what I recall, and it's in the chapters. He clusters chapters on saintliness and on the value of saintliness, and then goes on to mysticism in a couple of chapters. Well, this was in the section about the middle of the section on saintliness. And it's my understanding or my interpretation of him that he values holiness or saintliness when there is when there are fruits in the fruits of one's prayer, fruits of one's visions that result in inspiring others, in assisting others, in courageous acts, that kind of thing. So that's my understanding in the sections that I've read of William James. Now, with regard to Saint Teresa of Avila, he speaks of her in the context of being egocentric, of not providing support for her sisters in the convent, instead of having a rather public face. And what I recall at that time when she lived was that, first of all, she was being critically viewed by the Vatican. And she had to defend herself. And they were looking at her writings and other things. And so she had to take a strong position. Now, I'll bring more of that to you next week. The other thing is that she's written several books, and one of the books is The Interior Castle. And that book is a very realistic and detailed introduction and development of the mystical life. And so, and she wrote that while she was alive. And so she, in fact, did give her sisters many religious instruction. And so those are just 2 points that come up for me. And I'd have to go back and look at what else he said, and also the history of her life, which I will, because there's been a lot written on her life. There are 2 other things that were mentioned prior to his critique of Saint Teresa. And one was a sharp criticism of the vow of obedience. And he stated, he quoted many people in critiquing obedience, and he also quoted saints honoring obedience. And I myself entered a religious community, and I took a vow of obedience. And my understanding of the vow of obedience is not what he put forth, which is a very individualistic handing over of one's freedom to someone else. But it's in the context of the community, of the good of the community and the mission of the community. And so it's not, when one chooses to enter a community, yes, you put yourself, and also it doesn't mean that you can't request certain things. You may not get them, but you can certainly request certain things. So that's on the section on obedience. And then just before Saint Teresa, he talks about Saint Margaret Alacoque. And she is the saint to whom our Lord appeared, and that is what is reported, and asked her to, he took her heart, put it in his, and then gave her heart back, and infused with spiritual power and love. And what I want to say about that is that I have not studied her life much, but 2 things. As a result of her devotion to the Sacred Heart, the Church has instituted a monthly devotion to the Sacred Heart on the first Friday of every month. And that is explicitly what he is reported to have asked her. Now, William James strongly critiques her, because he says, he read some life of hers, which I don't know, that she was very weak after these visions, and that she was basically useless in the convent. They asked her to work in the kitchen, and she'd start, and she couldn't focus. She couldn't do any work there. They put her in other areas, as you will read, and she was completely incompetent. Now, I think that, at least in my experience, my critique of that, so he writes her off. We know there are people, in a community, for example, I was part of a religious community, who, for whatever reason, become incapable of doing different kinds of work. And they are not critiqued for not being able to do that if they are honestly trying. But they are related to in a compassionate way. And if they have a strong prayer life, then that's their vocation. So those are the three areas that I read that I just felt he didn't really know. In two of them, he didn't consider obedience in the context of community and the mission of the community, the service of the community. And with St. Teresa, he didn't study her history, her context, what was going on. And so I'll leave it there.
Okay. And yeah, I'll check up on that and put in my 2 cents, and then you'll have more specifics to say. But that's a good start. And then the other weird thing about what he's saying, I mean, how could she be so weak and unfocused if she wrote these books like The Interior Castle?
Oh, no, that's the other woman. That's the other woman, Margaret Alaquo.
Uh-huh.
Just the opposite with Teresa. She
Oh,
was really out there founding monasteries and writing books and being a vocal presence.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant that he was criticizing St. Teresa herself, but he's also criticizing Margaret Allercourt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and she's the one who became incompetent, supposedly. But yeah, you're right. There, I don't think it doesn't seem in the spirit of Christianity to judge a nun harshly if she loses her focus. And that was supposed to be after she had visions, because St. Teresa had visions too.
Right, right.
So did Margaret Allercourt. What's the last?
She lived at another time in another order, in another country.
But what's her last name? Allercourt?
I have to, it's Alaquote, I think.
Allerquote.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I'll send it to you. I'll send it.
Yes, I'll look it up. And she was a contemporary of St. Teresa, or just a different order and different time altogether?
I'm not sure of her dates exactly as
okay.
they relate to Teresa.
But, and he
but
has
I'll find out.
Okay, and he has them back to back, and
yes,
varieties
back to back.
Just kind of picking
First
on
St. Margaret and then Teresa.
So he's got kind of a picking on women section of
well,
the book.
That's what I couldn't help but feel that a bit.
Yeah. So
it may have been characteristic of the time. I don't know.
Yeah. And I found one of those places where he talks about fruit. You said he wanted to judge things by their fruit. And I think we went over this quote maybe in seminar 3. It's from lecture 9, Conversion Concluded. I'll read the whole thing, but it comes in at the end. Pray go back and recollect one of the conclusions. This is William James talking in the Varieties of Religious Experience. Pray go back and recollect one of the conclusions to which I sought to lead you in my very first lecture. You may remember how I there argued against the notion that the worth of a thing can be decided by its origin. Our spiritual judgment, I said, our opinion of the significance and value of a human event or condition must be decided on empirical grounds exclusively. So that's the
Yes.
radical empiricist coming out in James. And here's the key sentence: if the fruits for life, and that's in italics, if the fruits for life of the state of conversion are good, we ought to idealize and venerate it, even though it be a piece of natural psychology. If not, we ought to make short work of it. In other words, if it doesn't have fruits
Yes.
for life, or good fruits for life, we ought to make short work of it, no matter what supernatural being may have infused it. So it doesn't matter if it comes from Mother Mary or some sort of supernatural
Yes.
being. If it doesn't have any fruits for life, any kind of real value in the real world, then we should just make quick work of it. So he's the pragmatist, remember, he's a utilitarian. And I've written an essay, it's been pretty widely published, called 11 Objections to Utilitarianism. So in seminar 5, or maybe even if we have a lull in this seminar, I can run over and get a copy and go through that. But I mean, at some point, to give my critique of utilitarianism, because that will also be a critique of James, because James is a utilitarian. And I don't accept all 11 objections to utilitarianism, but I accept enough of them that I'm not a utilitarian for that reason. So he seems like he's giving a bit of an unlikely story, but it could be true of the other. And the other woman is a saint as well, Margaret Allercourt?
Yes, she is. Yes.
Okay.
She's recognized by the church as a saint, yes.
So at least he's not picking on some poor nun who really not much is claimed for. At least he's picking on saints. So he's got big targets, at least. And let's see, I thought he may have mentioned the word fruit somewhere else.
I think he did.
Yeah, I see it. It's in the saintliness lecture. And it's in lecture, well, he doesn't, Wiki quote doesn't nail it down. It's in lectures 11, 12, and 13, but we don't know where. But it's got the word fruits in there. I'll read that quote too, and you might be able to find it in your printout. This one,
I'm sure I will.
Yeah, this one we went over last week, as I recall, because we caught up.
Yes.
We had to get up to about lecture 12 to stay on track.
Yeah.
And then we're supposed to do about 13 through 16 this week,
yes. Right.
And then 17 through 20 next week. And then we've done all 20 lectures in the variety of religious experience. So let me read that one. And if you have the printout, maybe you can find it. It's lectures 11, 12, and 13 on saintliness.
Yes.
The collective name.
Oh, yes.
The collective name for the ripe fruits of religion in a character is saintliness. The saintly character, pardon me, is the character for which spiritual emotions are the habitual center of the personal energy. And there is a certain composite photograph of universal saintliness, the same in all religions, of which the features can easily be traced. And I remember both of us last week liked the fact that he was talking about universal saintliness in all religions. So he wasn't being narrow-minded or parochial in the negative sense. And but he does talk about the ripe fruits of religion. And one of them is a good character. That's called having a saintly character, but he understands it as a center of personal energy. It's an emotion, a spiritual emotion that drives you motivationally.
Yes.
As opposed to a lot of people, I think, would not really think of saintliness, because when you think of a saint, you might think of a more reserved person, not really all somebody full of pep.
Right, right.
Them and vigor, not somebody flighty who's like hustling and bustling all around the convent or whatever. But you might think of someone who's like more reserved and dignified. But he thinks it's a matter of personal energy. So I guess you'd be out there trying to heal the sick and educate the ignorant, and you'd be very active. You might
Yes,
think of a saint as somebody who's immersed in prayer a good chunk of the day, maybe 8 or 12 hours of prayer, all alone, or reading the Bible and being in scholarly pursuits with not high energy necessarily, and then maybe spends a few hours a day that are more energetic. It's based on like a stereotype of what a saint is depicted in the movies or in popular
yes.
imagination.
I'm really glad you went to that second one. I found it right away when
Oh,
you were
good, good.
reading it. Yeah. And I really appreciate your energy. You know, the other thing that's interesting is that Mother Teresa is also Saint Teresa.
Correct.
And at first I wondered which one he was talking about. And Mother Teresa, of course, was very involved in caring for the dying, in
The
all
lepers.
sorts of activities. But she also prayed for hours in the chapel and only slept for 4 hours.
Wow.
So it's, it's just interesting how she had that energy to do so much and was drawn, to prayer for so many hours also.
Yeah, and my favorite atheist perhaps is Christopher Hitchens, and we talked about him in an earlier seminar.
Yes.
He has a book called God is Not Great, which is kind of tweaking the nose of Muslims because that's one of their slogans, God is great. And he wrote a whole book on the modern Saint Teresa, Mother Teresa. And I think it's called The Missionary Position. And he criticizes her for being more concerned with material goods and fundraising than with actually doing the work of Jesus as he understands it. But I know she worked with lepers, which I doubt that Christopher Hitchens did. So she might have one up on him on that one. Certainly more than I have. I haven't worked with lepers at all. So I used to collect coins and I guess little tokens maybe from leper colonies.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, they have little aluminum coins or something because they didn't want the lepers to be using the regular coins because they thought it would spread the virus or whatever is causing the leprosy beyond the leper colony. So they would isolate them in leper colonies, and then they'd mint little aluminum coins for them to use so they could do trade with each other. And so you can actually collect these little aluminum tokens. I don't know how safe it is or not to collect them, but when I was a kid, I would buy them through it was called Littleton Coin Company, and they would have little envelopes, and they'd mail you these envelopes with coins from around the world. And so I noticed it almost from a leper colony. So I looked at it, and it was made out of aluminum. I kind of liked aluminum coins because they were so light, and
Yeah.
you could get pretty good detail on the coin, and it would stay shiny. I like shiny. I was just a child, so I was attracted by the shiny objects. So aluminum coins were just as shiny, maybe even shinier than the silver,
Yes.
because the silver would tarnish and everything, and but the aluminum wouldn't. So
It's so interesting that you're talking about that because I just listened last night to a man who is a chaplain who has this artistic ability as well. And he paints his, he does his painting on aluminum. And he talks about how aluminum will last so much longer than, keep the painting vivid and for many more years than a wood or canvas will.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine it would crack. The aluminum would crack. Maybe the paint would crack, but on a wooden canvas or wooden background that you're paint directly onto the wood could swell or crack and could distort the image. Whereas the aluminum, I think, would be more stable.
That's what his experience was.
Yeah, and enamel is used sometimes too. I don't know about painting on enamel, but there are artistic creations, and some coins have enamel on them as well. And it's good for bright colors, and it looks pretty stable in the coins I've seen that use enamel. I think there may be some Portuguese coins that used enamel and some other ones, commemorative coins usually, but so yeah, there are different ways of trying to keep your message going. Putting your religious messages on coins is one. I remember the Falkland Islands had "Desire the Right" was the slogan of Falkland Islands. So not desire the money, desire the fame, but desire the right. And then they had a picture of a sheep there on the Falkland Islands coin, commemorative coin, called the Malvinas by the Argentinians, who tried to claim it for their own up against Margaret Thatcher, and they had the Falklands War, Falkland Island Wars. So, well, I'll check into that and see if there's any way of figuring out a way to reconcile those two women's saints with William James, or if he's just on the wrong side of history, so to speak. It sounds like he's dug himself into a hole. At least he stopped digging since he died in 1910.
Yes, right.
James has stopped digging. Somebody like Donald Trump is still digging, apparently. So he keeps filing things with the court. But when you're already in a hole, one of the first pieces of good advice is to stop digging. So William James, we don't have to worry about that. Well, you want to go through some more of these?
Yes. Quotes, very good.
Now that you have them handy there.
Yeah,
so I think we did up through 12 and maybe even 13. I think we got to go to 14, 15, and 16.
Yes.
Maybe 13 as well. But 13 sometimes got lumped together into 11 and 12 saintliness. But here's another one. 14 and 15 are called the value of saintliness.
Yes.
So it looks like we're done with 13. And you see they have it in two in bold, and the middle part is not in bold. Yes. So you want to read it this time, since I've been reading them? Let's get your voice out there.
All right. So are we reading the one that starts, "The gods we stand"?
Yeah, "The gods we stand by."
Okay, fine.
Go ahead.
The gods we stand by are the gods we need and can use. The gods whose demands on us are reinforcements of our demands on ourselves and on one another. What I then propose to do is briefly state to test saintliness by common sense, to use human standards to help us decide how far the religious life commends itself as an ideal kind of human activity. It is, but the elimination of the humanly unfit and the survival of the humanly fittest applied to religious beliefs. And if we look at history candidly and without prejudice, we have to admit that no religion has ever, in the long run, established or proved itself in any other way. religions have approved themselves. They have ministered to sundry vital needs, which they found reigning. When they violated other needs too strongly, or when other faiths came which served the same needs better, the first religions were supplanted.
So what do you make of that? What do you make of that long quote?
Well, I remember reading this in the book. I think from a human point of view, that that it's true that the gods we stand by are the gods we need and can use. The gods whose demands on us are reinforcement of our demands on ourselves and on one another. I think that's human nature, and it carries over into religion.
Yeah, I can see that, but I think he's barking up the wrong tree, because a lot of religions repress the expression of human needs. Like you might be homosexual by nature, and you need to find a lover of the same sex, or
Yes, right.
and yet a lot of religions have repressed homosexuality, for example. And then you might need to eat. So maybe, in terms of your health, you probably wouldn't need to eat more, but some people just psychologically, that's their way of dealing with stress, is that they eat more. But
Yes.
you have one of the 7 deadly sins is gluttony, last time I checked. So a lot of religions kind of put you on notice not to overdo things. You shouldn't be lustful, and you shouldn't be greedy, and you shouldn't be vain. But a lot of people might need to be worried about their looks or something. Maybe they don't have a lot of great talent, but they're pretty good looking. So they spend a lot of time working with what they've got.
Yeah.
A beautiful face or beautiful eyes or something. And they're always looking to accentuate the positive. And, maybe they're not good mathematicians or bookkeepers, and maybe they're not great athletes, but they just have a beautiful face and beautiful full lips or whatever. And so they're spending a lot of time putting lipstick on, not a pig, but they're putting a lipstick on a beautiful full set of lips, and they're putting mascara on a beautiful set of eyes. But that might be criticized in some religions as being vain. Like, it's hard for me to imagine. I don't know what the actual rules are, but I wouldn't imagine that the nuns spend very many hours in a day putting their face on. So I haven't seen too many nuns with lipstick that I've noticed. I mean, if you have a chapped lip, they could put some chapstick on or something, but
Right.
probably not ruby red or black lipstick or something. That would be attention getting. And of course, in the Muslim tradition, they in many sects anyway, they would cover the face, maybe, not the eye. In some sects, even the eyes are covered to some extent. Not so much that they can't see out of the veil, but you have trouble seeing into the veil. And then the nose, sometimes the eyes are completely exposed, but the nose and the mouth are totally covered up.
I read this a little differently. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I think that
You want to take a break and get a little bit of water? We could stop recording, and you could. Sounds like you.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Oh, okay. Let me know if you need a break or something, because 90 minutes without a bathroom break or something might be too much.
Okay. I was thinking of people who are transgendered, or thinking of gay men and their sexual practice. And I think there are, I think there are a lot of people, most people, that are uncomfortable with that on a human level. And so, so when we say here, the gods we stand by are the gods we need and can use. When I think of all the conservative religions that curse, you know, Sadat, how do you say that? Sodomy? No, the sexual practice of gay men.
Yes,
And transgender people.
right.
But I think what I've observed is that some of these people, same people, I'm going to have to stop.
Yeah, well, you hit the pause if you think, and then I don't know if you can hit pause or just go ahead and take your break and we'll let it run.
Okay.
Okay, feel a bit better?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, anytime you need a break, just go ahead and call timeout.
Well, what I was trying to say is that I think these same people are afraid of these feelings in themselves.
Yes.
And I feel that, I mean, I've just sensed that. And so when I read this, the gods we need and can use, that's what I think of, you know, to condemn other people.
Yeah, you could, you needed to condemn other people and whip up some hysteria and get people to think they're threats to their children, that these
Yes.
gay people or trans people are going to be bad role models for their kids, or may actually be preying on them. You have predatory, aggressive homosexuality, and with children because they're more vulnerable and can be their gullibility or their trust in their elders could be exploited. So and they can use that to, you know, sort of divide and conquer, or say other religions are not as good because they don't weed out the gay and trans people, as well as a particular conservative fundamentalist religion, could be Protestant or Catholic for that matter.
Yes.
Or Islam might have, I don't know as much about Islam, but I have taught it a bit. I remember reading Iliade, I believe it is. His first name starts with M. Islam Observed, I think, was the book. And then I taught a book by a Pakistani American Muslim. I think it was called Islam Today. And I think he taught at George Washington University. And is Ahmed Akbar, I believe his name was. And so those are the two. And then I've read other things on Islam, of course, but they're two of the main influences on my thinking. So I don't know enough, but my my sense is that the tolerance for homosexuality in Islam is not at the high pitch level, but I could be totally wrong. So, but the other reason why I think he's barking up the wrong tree here is he's disagreeing with Daniel Dennett. Daniel Dennett sees religions as competing with each other for market share. But see, I'm not sure religions really compete that way. I mean, some religions, their marketability is like, this is the way it is, this is the gospel truth, and we're not going to change it to market it to current sensibilities. Like the Roman Catholic Church has aspects of this going on. Like, if we start to change our brand and we let in more homosexuals, or we have women priests even, something that wouldn't be illegal. And a lot of, when I say even, it's not that I think that homosexuality is worse or something than being a woman priest. It's just that you have another hurdle of the legality. Like, it could actually be illegal in a country, whereas obviously being a woman's not illegal, and being a woman priest wouldn't be illegal by the secular law. It could be against church law, and often is. So, but what I'm thinking is that, I mean, if they really wanted to market their religion, they would be open to women priests, because I think a lot of women would be interested in being priests, and then a lot of people would be interested in being ministered to by a woman priest. But then you'd lose a lot of the traditionalists, but you could split into branches of Catholicism. You could have the traditional Roman Catholic, and then you could have new progressive Catholic or something, and have a split in the church. And then you're marketing to, both sides of that particular question. Is that still a problem, attracting enough men to be priests? Now that they weeded out so many of them as being sexual predators, that's cut down on the number of priests that can minister, and then priests that want to have a more active sexual life might be attracted more to Protestant, or I don't know, Mormon, especially the Mormon that has multiple wives. There's a branch of the Mormons that allows multiple wives. So are they having trouble? Have you followed?
Yes. There are very few Roman Catholic priests being ordained.
And my understanding is, though, that you can be a priest and have a wife, but you must have married her before you were ordained as a priest. But then if you do all the work to earn ordination, they don't make you divorce your wife, because they don't believe in divorce. So they wouldn't say, well, damn it, you would be a priest, you'd be a damn fine one, but you got to divorce your wife. They don't make you do that, because that would be hypocritical. So there are some priests that have wives, is my understanding, but it's because they were married earlier, and then they converted from being a Protestant minister with a wife to being a Catholic priest, and you get to keep your wife. You're not forced to choose between the priesthood and your marriage. That would be a tough choice for a lot of people. But is that your understanding, that there are some married priests, that they got a loophole there if you're married before?
I really don't know.
Okay.
I think that's true of the Episcopal Church.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it's sort of the American version of the Anglican
Yes.
Church.
Yeah.
It may not be true of Roman Catholic priests. So I think I remember talking about that with Jerry too. I'll have to check into that. But in any event, I think he's barking up the wrong tree, because it looks to me that a lot of religions just aren't interested in marketing. Like we got the goods. I mean,
yes,
if you don't want to participate in our religion, that's not going to bother us. It's going to be your problem. It's not going to be our problem.
Yeah.
Because we're going to heaven. I mean, you're going to hell. And we told you once, we told you twice, and a few other times too. And if you're still going to be adamant about this, we're not going to market to you. We're not going to pander to you. That's what I think a lot of religions come across as like, we got the goods, you should be coming to us. We're not going to be coming to you and changing our message or anything. You should come to us, and we'll meet you halfway by opening up a church in your neighborhood. But we're not going to change our doctrine just to get you into the church. They did change, I guess, conducting all masses in Latin. They did change that, and you can conduct a mass in English now, right?
Yes, yes.
So that's a concession that might be looked at as a form of marketing, but that's not changing the doctrine. It's just changing the procedure of delivering the doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's in Islam, it's considered better to read the Quran in Arabic, but there are translations of the Quran.
Yes, yes.
And I would imagine they would like you to, if you didn't read Arabic, they'd be happier that you read a translation than not read the Quran at all, but I don't know. And then, but then eventually you should learn Arabic. And I've heard speakers say that they can make connections with Muslims, like some American operatives said that if they could pray in Arabic with Muslims in Afghanistan or Iraq, that they would be trusted more, that would be a way to break the ice and establish a friendly relationship with them. So part of it is linguistic. So, but if you were just purely interested in marketing your religion, you might not be as strict, or you might not have a big preference for what language the religious message is delivered in. So I think he's barking up the wrong tree, because he says, the only way religions can really prove themselves is just attracting a lot of converts and meeting their needs and becoming popular. And I don't think that religions necessarily think that that's what they should be doing at all. They're saying, like, we got the goods, you want them, you don't want them, we don't care. I mean, we'd be a little happier if you joined us, because then you're not going to burn in hell, and we'd be a little relieved at that, at least, but maybe a lot relieved. But we're not going to market ourselves. That's beneath us to lower ourselves to marketing. Now, you do have those doctrinal points in Christianity that you're supposed to be fishers of men. You've heard something like that. Yeah. The fish symbol in Christianity is that you should be fishers of men, and you kind of reel them in. But not by changing doctrine or kind of changing those black robes and white robes into like multicolor robes or something that might be a little jazzier or something. Wear a daishiki robe in Africa, and the Catholic Church is doing pretty well marketing itself in Africa from what I've seen recently.
Yes. Jerry had a symbol of the fish here on his desk, but I don't see it right now.
But I think there's a passage in the Bible, I can't quote you chapter and verse right off the top of my head, about being fishers of men.
Yes, I remember that very well. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're supposed to proselytize and reel some men in, and of course women too. But I think the original wording is you should be fishers of men.
Yes, that was the original wording.
Yeah, but those were sexist times. And it's also said in Leviticus, you mentioned trans and gay, sodomy. For a man to lie with another man, the way he lies with a woman is an abomination before God. I think that's roughly accurate quote.
Yes.
That's in Leviticus. I couldn't cite you the chapter and verse of Leviticus, but it is in Leviticus. And there's another prohibition in another part of the Bible against homosexuality, as I recall, too, where it's pretty explicit like that. Mm-hmm. And wasting the seed. I think there's prohibition against wasting the seed, which sodomy would do, since it's not going into a reproductive organ that could, a fertile reproductive organ.
Yeah.
So I think he's off here. I think James is not really getting it. He's not getting what these, he's looking at it from the scientific point of view and the pragmatic utilitarian point of view. And he's saying, well, what really distinguishes the religion? You got to produce some fruit. And there is language like that in the Bible too. Like, by its fruits you will know them. What are
Yes, right. Mhm.
what's that?
Yes, yes.
And again, I can't quote you chapter and verse. Maybe you can. Please do if you can. So, oh, Jerry, is that Jerry? We're looking for your fish symbol.
Yeah, Jerry, you had a fish here. Remember?
Yeah,
I don't know where it
I don't
is.
know where it went. That's Jesus Christ, Son of God. It's Jesus Christos, Huios, Soter. It's Greek. Jesus
But there's
Christ.
something about being fishers of men in the
Well,
Bible.
it just original early Christians took as an anagram for their belief. So they used the fish, which is ichthus, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. And
I see. But is there a passage in the Bible that you're aware of that says something about we should be fishers of men?
yeah, there is a passage. I'd have to look for it.
Yeah, I can't
Fishers of
put
men,
chapter and
definitely.
verse. But so William James is saying that the only way religions can really distinguish themselves is by getting bigger and marketing themselves. And I think he may be barking up the wrong tree here, because a lot of religions take the attitude like, we got the message, we got the gospel. We're not going to change our message to market to you. You should be running to us.
Yeah. Well, he spent a lot of time on the Quakers. And they're always a pretty small group, but they had a lot of influence.
Yeah, Marita found a passage where he mentioned George Fox.
Yeah, George Fox was a tremendous founder of the Society of Friends. And of course, they never grew to be very large, but they had they helped to abolish slavery in the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
Society of Friends.
Right.
But when I looked up the some of the influences of James, I found a lot more with the Unitarians and the Transcendentalists. I didn't see a lot of Quakers in that particular picture, but I just need to read more broadly, I think, and find out what the Quaker influence was. Probably is anti-war or the moral equivalent of war. Maybe that's where the Quakers come in more. But when he's talking about the personal, individualistic side of religion, I don't know how individualistic the Quakers are, but the Transcendentalists and the Unitarians seem to have a bigger individualist streak from what I can figure out. I've never been a Unitarian or a Quaker, so I don't know from direct experience, but these are my impressions of their doctrine. I can check it out.
Yeah, I'll let you get back to your class.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, I just saw you there, and Marita had just been mentioning about your fish symbol. So
yeah, I have it somewhere. I used to be right on top here. I had a fish.
I know.
I don't know where it went. I'll have to find it. Yeah, I have my
Oh.
fish. Yeah, I always liked that symbol. When I was in the seminary, I had studied Greek, and that was basically the dominant symbol in early Christianity.
And then the atheists make fun of that because they have a little fish symbol and they have two little legs sprouting out of it. So about evolution, the fish sprouts legs and crawls up on the land. So that's the way the Christopher Hitchens of the world kind of mock that symbol of the fish.
Yeah.
But it was the Fishers of Men passage that I was
There's
trying
a passage in the Bible for sure.
Yeah, so there is some proselytizing or marketing, but it seems to be mandated, but not to the point of changing doctrine or changing the black or the white robes into multicolored, sexy robes or something, or not having women priests, or not allowing homosexuality among the priests, just so you get more priests and get more marketing ability.
Yeah.
So, well,
Okay, I'm
thanks.
gonna let you continue. I'll hear it
Talking
I'll hear
to you,
a
Jerry.
summary from Marita in a little bit.
Yeah.
You go another half an hour or so?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna do about 6 o'clock, I think, because we got a little bit of a late start.
Okay. I'll let you-
About 5,
yes,
5:45 to 6, something like.
yes, fine.
I think we started about 4:15. So we could go 5:45 or so. You said you don't have a ticker, so I managed to look at the clock to see when we started. I think it was about, but we took a little break there too. So we can go to 5:45 to 6 in there.
Oh, sure, that's fine.
So you see what I'm talking about when I'm accusing him of barking up the wrong tree?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I think he's assuming, again, kind of negatively, that really the only, and it's also too restrictive. He says that's the only way, like no religion has ever in the long run established or proved itself in any other way. See how restrictive that is?
Yes, yes,
And I think that's too restrictive. What do you
yes,
think?
I do too.
Yeah. I think you should be some more open-minded. I mean, if a religion wants to change its doctrine, I mean, I'm not going to beat them over the head with the change. You know, if it's a change for the better, it's a change for the better. But if they're changing just to get more people to come into the church, I guess I would worry more about that they're just worried
Yeah.
about the material monetary rewards of having a bigger church, like these mega churches you've seen.
Yes,
I do kind of worry about these mega churches. Like, how are they getting, and they're turning the religious ceremonies more into like rock concerts and stuff, where it's just a lot of popular music and beat music that they're using. But I suppose if it doesn't take away from the doctrine, who cares if they use the trappings of good marketing and the popularity of rock and roll music? But if it changes the doctrine, you wonder, well, wait a minute here, you claim to have some kind of supernatural source for good doctrine, and now you're changing the doctrine just because you want to go from a medium-sized church to a mega church or something. And that seems more suspicious to me. But maybe I'm just too suspicious generally. But it raises the hackles of my critical thinking a little bit. We're getting a lot of glare here. I might be able to put the blinds down. Are you getting too much light coming out of my?
no, I'm fine, but
Okay.
you do what you need to do.
Okay, I think I'm all right. I've lost my cursor here. I can't seem to find my cursor, maybe because of the glare. And it's not moving down. Huh. Let's see. Well, what's the next? Do you want to say anything more about this particular quote? Or you want to move on to the next one?
No, I think we could move on.
Oh, I've got my cursor back now.
Good.
All right, well, the next one is from lectures 14 and 15.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to read it, or would you like me to read it?
Well, I can read it.
This is the one that starts, is dogmatic or
Yeah.
scholastic theology.
Yes. Is dogmatic or scholastic theology less doubted in point of fact for claiming, wait a minute, less doubted in point of fact for claiming as it does to be in point of right, undoubtable? And if not, what command over truth would this kind of theology really lose if instead of absolute certainty, she only claimed reasonable probability for her conclusions? If we claim only reasonable probability, it will be as much as men who love the truth can ever at any given moment hope to have within their grasp. Pretty surely it will be more than we could have had if we were unconscious of our liability to err.
So what do you think of that?
Oh, I think it's an important statement. I think we should look at state dogma and state truths from the point of view of their probability, generally speaking. I mean, when we're looking at
Well, let me use a little Socratic method here, maybe be devil's advocate in a way. I mean, when you say thou shalt not kill, what's probabilistic about that? Or, well, I can't say that thou shalt not kill. I can just say there's a reasonable probability that you shouldn't kill. Doesn't that water down the message? And as opposed to somebody saying it's undoubtedly true that you shouldn't kill or you shouldn't murder. Sometimes kill is interpreted as murder. But if you just say it's a matter of probability or.
well, I don't, what, with regard to thou shalt not kill, we're looking at, it's interesting because most people, if someone was coming into their home and going to started shooting at their family, they would aim and shoot at that person. And
Yeah.
I had a very, well, I'll call it somewhat dramatic description of that in the, what is our paper here? The Mercury News.
Yeah, San Jose Mercury News.
Yeah, the only pastor that there has been here of the Ukrainian Catholics served both San Francisco and Santa Clara. We met him. We went to a service that they had, to join in them and to join with prayer and this long service. So a week later, there was an article in the Mercury News whereby he was quoted about his personal story. And his daughter lives in Ukraine, married a Ukrainian man, and his wife had gone over there. And he was going to follow. And he said explicitly that if someone came into their home to danger or shoot, armed to shoot their family, that he would shoot him. And he said, God forgive me, I would do that. And so that is really, I think it's justified from where I stand.
Mhm.
And there's also, of course, this new law in California about assisted suicide that doctors have to be involved in. And so that again addresses, I mean, if you're in favor of that, that again addresses killing someone, giving them the means to kill themselves, but you give them the means. So I'm not saying that thou shalt not kill is not a strong commandment. It is, but there are exceptions to it also.
That's why some people interpret it. I mean, I don't know what the original Greek or Aramaic or Hebrew is, but they interpret it as thou shalt not murder. And in some versions, some religions, sects, I should say, it's the fourth commandment, and some it's the fifth, I think, or maybe it's the fifth and the. So it's not even, the order is not stable, depending on which sect or version of the Bible you're talking about. On the one hand, it does seem to fit with Christian humility that we should be aware of our liability to err, because he's pointing that out. You see right there at the end, he says,
yes.
If we
were unconscious of our liability to err, yes.
So we're liable to err from time to time. It's a matter of probability. You don't want to be ignorant or unconscious of that. And that fits in with the humility that I think is in the teachings of Christ. And it's in, the 7 deadly sins, vanity is against, as distinguished from humility, and trying to remember all the places where humility comes out, but in Christianity, can any passages occur to you?
Well, I just want to mention something in a secular sense. There is now in medicine a strong educational stream called cultural humility. And what that is about is training physicians and other healthcare providers to establish more of an equal relationship with the patient, because the patient knows so much, not only about their own lived experience, but also what they will do and what they will not do in terms of treatment that you assign to them, or their own belief about why they have a particular illness. And so I've been involved in training doctors about cultural humility at Stanford. And so it's being recognized as something that we need to broadly consider in our lives, in relationships that are significant.
Yeah, they've had some cases where patients have complained of pain, especially women. This seems to happen to more often. And they complain of pain, and the doctors kind of dismiss it as hypochondria or just being melodramatic.
Yes, yes.
But then doctors get the same condition and they say, yeah, but you thought you had used anesthetic, but I could feel a lot of pain. I wasn't writhing in pain. You had paralyzed me with that tranquilizer, but you hadn't blotted out the pain.
Yes.
And it took for an actual doctor to testify, no, I felt the pain, and may have been a male doctor even. Then they say, oh, wow, well, thanks for telling us that. Now we'll change the, anesthesia to a different anesthesia or an additional anesthesia. So we don't want to just make it impossible for you to move while you're suffering and horrible pain from surgery or whatever it was. We want you to actually not feel any pain. So that's the kind of thing that made them more humble. Like, oh, wow, we thought we knew what we were doing. But then we had somebody that we trusted. They didn't trust women, just ordinary women, patients, to say that they were in pain and the anesthesia wasn't working or the painkiller wasn't working. But then when a doctor had the exact same experience, they said, okay, well, we trust, he's one of us, so we better trust his report or her report. It could have been a woman doctor, but I think it was a male doctor finally went through the same kind of, it was a tumor or something, and they thought they were blocking it out while they were removing the tumor, but they had horrible pain, or maybe just the after effects of the surgery. They thought they were giving the women enough painkiller, and they just didn't believe them when they said that the pain was persisting. There are particular procedures where they had that realization. So when you know that you're liable to err, when you have cases like that, you should talk about probabilities and like we might be making a mistake. It's non-zero probability that we're making a mistake. And that seems to fit right in with the humility.
Well, yes, right, exactly.
Christianity, that you should be humble. Well, part of it, is thou shalt not bear false witness. You don't want to be lying about yourself and bragging too much. Then you're going to be bearing false witness about yourself. That kind of keeps you down to earth. You can't lie, so you can't brag too much to the point where you're actually lying. But probabilistic, I don't know. That seems to again be barking up the wrong tree for me. Like when you have a commandment, and you've got a limited number of them. It's not like you have 475 different dietary restrictions like some religions seem to have. I think Judaism has like hundreds of dietary restrictions or something.
Yes, yeah.
10 commandments, you can count them on your fingers. And honor thy father and mother. Let's take that one. You don't want to say, well, it's reasonable for you to honor your father and mother, or you probably should honor your father and mother. Now, on the other hand, you might have a real nasty father or mother too. So you don't want to honor them too much. Maybe you should dishonor them to some extent because they've lost it, but there's at least seems to be some kind of attitude of gratitude, or maybe it is probabilistic. You say, well, most people's mother and father are honorable people, and so we're just going to have a probabilistic rule: honor thy father and mother. But it sounds like it's strong because it's a commandment. You know, it's not just a consideration or a probabilistic
Yes,
rule.
yes,
It's not a rule of thumb, right?
yes.
So
Well, he prefaces this paragraph with, is dogmatic or scholastic theology less doubted in point of fact, proclaiming as it does to be in point of right undoubtable. And dogma is not commandment, and of course scholastic theology, those are talking about truths. And I get your point that, for example, we believe as Catholics, I believe in the Trinity, but the way that it is described has been described is makes it difficult to do anything but make an assent to. Whereas more current theology talks about the Trinity in constant relationship and describes that in particular ways. And it makes it more, not only more believable, but more generative, that the Father is pouring himself into the Son, and the Son in the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit, and then that love is also coming to us. There are some that describe it in better ways than others. And so I agree that I shouldn't have jumped for that probable, but
well, it's good to focus on that. I mean, I'm focusing on it too, because some parts of the Bible don't really seem to be, oh, it's just a reasonable probability. It's like a rule of thumb. You know, when you call something a commandment or the 7 deadly sins, I mean, you don't want to screw around with deadly sins if it's just a probability, it's
right.
I'm willing to take a chance on a deadly sin every once in a while or something. It sounds like it's pretty final. If you call it a deadly sin, it's not really up for discussion. It seems more dogmatic or undoubtable. Scholastic theology, I'm thinking of like Saint Anselm and Saint Augustine and Saint Aquinas.
Yeah.
What Rene Descartes, the philosopher who was Catholic, called the schoolmen.
Mm-hmm.
So Aquinas I actually respect quite a bit because he was trying to use Aristotle.
Right. Yeah.
Secular, although Aristotle had his own religious beliefs, but kind of in a secular way, trying to use the science. Aristotle was more scientific than Plato was, and actually collected animal samples and tried to learn from the study of animals, early science. And James has a background in science, of course, too. So I guess he's asking questions. You can't fault him too much. He's asking 2 questions in a row, but I guess the gist of his question, and then that final bold part, which is if we claim only reasonable probability. See, I think he's saying that's a good way to go. We should claim only reasonable probability, not even that it's not even that it's probable, more probable than not. No, he's not even claiming more than 50% probability. He's just saying a reasonable,
Probable,
only a
yeah.
reasonable probability, like maybe 30 or 40% is okay. And it'll be better. Pretty surely it will be more than we could have had if we were unconscious of our liability. But that's a bit of a false dilemma. Like nobody's saying, yeah, we should be totally unconscious of our liability to err. But I guess he's saying, well, that is not a straw man argument or a false dilemma, because you have the schoolmen, you have scholastic theology and dogma in the church. And so they're missing out on this alternative of being probable or reasonable probability.
Well, there's also the question, of kind of judging people as though we were God. For example, one of the commandments is thou shalt not steal. Now, we know that some people in this world are close to starvation. So if one of the family goes and steals, takes what isn't theirs so that their family can live, again, are we saying there, thou shalt not steal is a standard, but in this case, we have compassion for this man. We don't accuse him of a mortal sin. And, the same with the priest who says, if somebody comes in to kill my family, I'm going to shoot them.
Right. Well, that's self-defense. And you might think, well, come on. I mean, thou shalt not kill really means thou shalt not murder. But the stealing one is good, because that's where Victor Hugo and Les Miserables, Jean Valjean, steals the loaf of bread to feed his family.
Yes.
And we're all on the side of Jean Valjean, not the detective chasing after him for the whole book. And then also coveting your neighbor's possessions, coveting your neighbor's ox or coveting your neighbor's wife. At that time, wives were treated more like possessions.
Yes.
So, that might be understandable if somebody, neighboring farmer has a really nice ox and you covet it. I mean, you're not stealing it. You're just
right. It's hard not to. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that farmer works himself so hard he drops dead, so that I can buy his ox at auction when they auction off all his stuff. And that's kind of a nasty thought, but it's just thinking. It's not actually doing anything about it. And but that's a commandment too. See, that's something that might be where you could talk about probability. It's probably a bad thought to have, that you wish your neighbor, the farmer, would drop dead so you could buy his first-rate ox and replace your second-rate ox with his first-rate ox. That's probably not the healthiest attitude to have, but is it really a dogmatic commandment? You can't even think about, you can't even dream, of some good fortune coming your way like that. It's kind of,
oh yeah, right.
Rick,
Well, shall we move on?
I was going to suggest that too. The next one is called The Value of Saintliness. And the I am no lover comes up twice. So let's just go to the
just
bullet
a minute
item.
now.
Just go to the bullet item I am well aware of. You want to read that one now that you're in a better position to read because you get the printout there?
Now, which?
It's a bullet item underneath the picture. Says, I am well aware of how anarchic. It's above the blue sky one, but it's below the picture of the stars. Just go to the bullet item. Don't pay attention.
Oh, I see. Yes, you're on 10. Okay. okay, yes.
It's lecture 14.
Yes, I got it. I got it. Yeah.
I don't see the 10, but
14 and 15. Yeah, 10, my page 10 of the
oh, I see.
of the
See,
quote.
I am well
Yeah.
aware of how
Yeah.
anarchic.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead?
Well, why did you read this one?
Sure, I can read it. Let's see here. I am well aware of how anarchic much of what I say may sound. This is William James talking.
Yes.
Expressing myself thus abstractly and briefly, I may seem to despair of the very notion of truth, but I beseech you to reserve your judgment until we see it applied to the details which lie before us. I do indeed disbelieve that we or any other mortal men can attain on a given day to absolutely incorrigible and unimprovable truth about such matters of fact as those with which religions deal.
Mhm.
But I reject this dogmatic ideal not out of a perverse delight in intellectual instability. I am no lover of disorder and doubt as such. Rather, do I fear to lose truth by this pretension to possess it already wholly.
Mhm.
He thinks if you're not humble to
Yes,
say, well, I'm onto something, but I don't have the whole picture.
exactly.
You
Yes.
don't say that, then you're liable to lose too much of the truth because you're not really looking to complete the picture. You think you've got it all, or you don't see what the problem would be.
Yes.
So I guess I don't mind that. Again, that's a matter of being humble. And Buddhism says you should be humble. Christianity, I think, says you should be humble.
Yes. Yes.
I think Islam has something to that effect too, but I couldn't quote you the part of the Quran that says it. Well, for example, I think Islam would be against comparing yourself with Muhammad or something. That I don't think that
Yes.
would be a good
Right.
idea. So that's a pretty easy one to deal with. Do you want to go to the next one, or is there something else
Okay.
about that one?
No.
Yeah, that one he's just being kind of humble. So again, you want me to do it, or you want to do this one?
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, this is underneath the photo again.
Yes.
So it starts with a genuine firsthand religious. You see it?
Yes.
Okay, a genuine firsthand religious experience like this is bound to be a heterodoxy to its witnesses. The prophet appearing as a mere lonely madman. If his doctrine proved contagious enough to spread to any others, it becomes a definite and labeled heresy. But if it then still proved contagious enough to triumph over persecution, it becomes itself an orthodoxy. And when a religion has become an orthodoxy, its day of inwardness is over. The spring is dry. The faithful live at second hand exclusively and stone the prophets in their turn. The new church, in spite of whatever human goodness it may foster, can be henceforth counted on as a staunch ally in every attempt to stifle the spontaneous religious spirit and to stop all later bubblings of the fountain from which in purer days it drew its own supply of inspiration. What do you think?
Wait a minute. I have lost you.
Oh, it starts with a genuine firsthand with a hyphenated firsthand. It's underneath the.
I got that. Yes. But then I don't, if his doctrine prove, and then I don't know, contagious enough, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, if his doctrine proved contagious enough
Yes.
to spread to any others,
Mhm.
becomes a definite and labeled heresy. So maybe you should read that part, because maybe I'm just not reading it right.
Okay, well,
Maybe you'll understand it better if you read it.
well, I'll start over. A genuine firsthand religious experience like this is bound to be a to its witnesses. The prophet appearing as a mere lonely madman. If his doctrine prove contagious enough to spread to any others, it becomes a definite and labeled heresy. But if it then prove contagious enough to triumph over persecution, it becomes itself an orthodoxy. And when a religion has become an orthodoxy, its day of inwardness is over. The spring is dry. The faithful live at second hand exclusively, and stone the prophets in their turn. The new church, in spite of whatever human goodness it may foster, can be henceforth counted on as a staunch ally in every attempt to stifle the spontaneous religious spirit and to stop all later bubblings of the fountain from which in purer days it drew its own supply of inspiration.
So what do you make of that one?
Well, I don't think it's true. A genuine firsthand religious experience like this.
Is it overstated or understated, or is there a particular sentence that you think is false?
Well, it's definitely overstated. I think there is that temptation to be a believer who is not who rides on the coattails of the faith that is professed by his church, his or her church. But I do think that for example, in Catholicism, people are really, Catholics are encouraged to pray deeply and meditate and get in touch, sit with these truths, so that in fact, they are at the bubblings of the fountain. And it's rather than discourage it, it's encouraged. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is overstated because he's saying that if you get an orthodoxy, then you can't be spontaneous anymore. But
Yeah.
that doesn't follow. I mean, I see a little tension there, but it's not like you would drop the orthodoxy at the drop of a hat spontaneously, but you could flesh out the orthodoxy spontaneously. Why would it?
Yes.
Why would the wellspring run dry just because you have an orthodoxy? Like, let's say you say, thou shalt not murder or thou shalt not kill, but then you could flesh it out based on spontaneous experiences with somebody dying miserably. And you say, well, let's make an exception and we won't interpret kill to be letting them die. We won't actively kill them, but we'll let them die. And that'll be our new orthodoxy that will make a distinction between actively killing and letting them die from thirst or from starvation. Yes. But that could come spontaneously through a really moving experience of somebody begging for death, and it just, the well springs of your faith said, well, this can't be the right. This is not what Jesus would do, is to allow this person to suffer like this. Jesus was a healer and ended a lot of suffering. So if you're trying to follow in Jesus's footsteps, you could say, well, let's not interpret kill. You know, maybe it means more like murder or something, and it doesn't really mean kill. Or you could be spontaneously responding to somebody invading a home invasion, as you put it, that say, well, I have a right to defend myself and defend my family. You know, how can I honor my mother and father when you have this home invader and he's going after my mother and father?
Yeah, right.
And what am I just going to let my mother and father be slaughtered by this maniac who, you know, this drugged out zombie looking for money to buy more drugs? No,
Yes.
I'm going to shoot him to save my parents. That seems more consistent with the Decalogue, you know, the Ten Commandments, than just allowing them to be slaughtered
Yes.
and
Yeah.
have all their belongings taken from them. So I think he's wrong here too. I sure am disagreeing a lot with him in the he's a Hall of Famer and I respect the guy. He's certainly highly accomplished, but when you actually put his writings under the microscope the way we're doing in this seminar, he doesn't always come out ahead. In fact, I'd say most of the time he's falling a bit short, don't you think?
Yes, yes. Overstating, yes.
I did like his one about kind of being a little more humble there, like one or two of them ago. But this one, I think he's trying to oppose an orthodoxy with spontaneity, and I can see how you wouldn't want to just throw an orthodoxy out spontaneously. I mean, you're going to look too arbitrary. But you could flesh. See, what he's overlooking is you could flesh out or build on the orthodoxy and come up with another part of the orthodoxy by
Yes.
spontaneous religious experiences, or maybe, you know, spontaneous experiences in real life that just happen to you spontaneously and you learn from them.
Yes, yes,
Discuss
yes,
them in fellowship with your fellow Christians or Buddhists or whatever.
yes,
And then you develop another add-on orthodoxy or different. It wouldn't necessarily have to undo the previous orthodoxy.
right,
He's assuming that
right.
there's going to be some kind of conflict. But, you know, may not have all, when you're forming a religion, you don't necessarily have the entire Bible written in one go, you know.
Right.
It may be written over time. In fact, the book I would recommend for how the Bible was written is a book by a guy named John Riches, Riches. It's called The Bible, A Very Short Introduction, on Oxford University Press. Around the year 2000, it was released. It was published. John Riches, The Bible, A Very Short Introduction. And he points out how long it took to actually get the canonical Bible. And of course, there are parts excluded from the canon, like the Gospel of St. Thomas,
Right.
which is actually pretty good. And some of them were found, like in 1948. They found the codexes in a cave. A shepherd in Egypt threw a rock in a cave and he heard something break and he went in to investigate and he found all these codexes, and his wife actually burned one of the codexes because they were cold that night and they needed some
Oh, my God.
power, so that she actually burned one of them just to get some warmth. So that's lost forever. But the Gospel of St. Thomas, I think, was not even discovered until 1948. And that's long after a lot of Bibles have been printed up.
Yes.
But they don't include it in there. They don't say addendum.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's kind of an arbitrary exclusion. Like, it's not St. Thomas's fault that his gospel wasn't found until 1948. Well, you want to move to the next one?
Fine.
Get up to lecture 16 if we're going to stay on track. We have at least two more to do. It is
All right.
5:47 already, but we took a break and we got a late start, so we could go till 6, I think, without.
Fine.
Was that okay?
Yes, yes.
All right, you want me to read the next one?
Fine.
Okay. So the next one is the plain fact is that men's minds are built, as has been often said, in watertight compartments. Religious after a fashion, they yet have many other things in them besides their religion, and unholy entanglements and associations inevitably obtain. And then this part's in bold. The basenesses so commonly charged to religion's account are thus almost all of them not chargeable at all to religion proper, but rather to religion's wicked practical partner, the spirit of corporate domination. And the bigotries are most of them in their turn chargeable to religion's wicked intellectual partner, the spirit of dogmatic dominion, the passion for laying down the law in the form of an absolutely closed-in theoretic system. The ecclesiastical spirit in general is the sum of these two spirits of dominion. That's from lectures 14 and 15 on the value of saintliness.
Yes.
I don't know what that has to do with the value of saintliness. I didn't hear a lot of saints being mentioned. I heard a bunch of wicked people mentioned in there. I think he's straight off topic a little bit there.
I think he's not, I understand that, for example, here in our own country, capitalism has a strong hold, I mean, in our culture throughout the country. And so you can say, having a pastor or a minister or a representative of the church critique capitalism is a rare phenomenon. And it is, because most people assume that as a given here in the United States. They wouldn't know how to live in a more socialized context, or, you know, under socialism and its principles. But I do think that, you know, for example, right now, with the environmental crisis, we know that oil is big money, that here in California, someone just stated that half of the greenhouse gases are due to transportation. And so I think that there is a place for churches to critique the culture, to critique capitalism, to raise questions. And just as I think it's the role of educators, but right now we're looking at saints, I guess, the value of saintliness. And I think saints have done that. If you look at St. Francis of Assisi, for example, he moved from a, you know, living in royalty to living in poverty and challenging the church on its riches and its property. So I'm just using him as an example because I don't think that the church can get off its responsibility to challenge the culture, whether it's the economic aspect of the culture or the racist aspect of the culture or the capitalistic aspect of the culture. So
Right.
anyway, that's my response to this.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it brings me back to a point I meant to mention earlier about the home invader. And some people would look at the so-called caravans of immigrants coming up into our southern border as invading our country. You know, they're coming here and they're looking for monetary opportunity. Often they want a better life for their children or themselves, their family, and or better medical treatment, or just they're escaping persecution by drug wars and gangs and so
Yes.
forth. So they're saying your 14-year-old son has to join our gang or we're going to kill him.
Mhm.
You know, you might take off for the border the next day. Because
Yes,
you don't want him to
exactly.
become a gang member and you don't want him to be killed either. So, so if you're faced with tough choices, and you shouldn't covet your neighbor's material goods, their oxen or anything, but you know, shouldn't you accept refugees coming in or refugees from poverty? And there are quite a few passages in the Bible about wealth. And despite the prodigal son parable is a little harder to pin down on this, but what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? The meek shall inherit the earth. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. It's faith, hope, and love. But I thought there was a part of the Bible that says faith, hope, and charity. But I think it's faith, hope, and love, and above all, love. But if you love your neighbor as yourself, you would probably be compassionate towards your neighbor. And it's as easy for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven as a camel to pass through the eye of a needle.
Mhm.
I think actually the original is more understandable. I think I took a class one time where the professor Bruce Kaufman, he's passed away now. He was from the Catholic University of America, but he came to the University of Maryland, where I was doing my undergraduate work, to teach a seminar. And he said the original is actually better interpreted as a camel hair passing through the eye of a needle. And
Oh,
as you know, Marita, from all the camels you have in your backyard, a camel hair is coarse, it's thick,
yes,
and it's also wavy. So it's hard to get it through the eye of a needle unless you're in a theme park or something and you've got
yes.
an imaginary camel jumping through especially enlarged paper mache needle or something. So there, you know, and of course, the only time I'm aware of in the Bible where Jesus was violent, as opposed to allowing other people to do violence to himself, is when he fashioned a bullwhip and he turned over the tables of the moneylenders in the temple and he whipped them. And that doesn't look like a very good endorsement. That's not a ringing endorsement of capitalism either. If you turn over the tables of the capitalist bankers there and start whipping them. So there are a lot of themes. And of course, liberation theology down in Haiti, you know, not in America, liberation theology hasn't caught on here.
Yes, right.
Why? Because you're right about capitalism being like an unofficial religion here. But if you look in the Constitution, I mean, it does say something called the takings clause, that the government can take private property and turn it to socially useful to promote the general welfare and have domestic tranquility with that. But it has to pay just compensation. So you can't take it without paying the owner of the property money. But then once you take it, you can give out 40 acres on a mule, or you could have a welfare or food stamp program or something. So that would all be constitutional. If you look at the preamble of the Constitution, it's what I'm thinking about. And then it's in the Fifth Amendment, I believe it has the just compensation clause, and it's been held to be part of the 14th Amendment too. So I think you're right that you should be have more critical thinking about capitalism. And so there are these socialist or non-capitalistic elements. I don't know if it's fair to say that Jesus was a socialist, but I do think it's fair to say Jesus was a liberal.
Yes,
I mean, hanging out with criminals and prostitutes and healing the sick. He's not relying on the free market of the Middle East to save the poor people who can't afford any kind of medical care. he's going on and laying on of hands and curing the blind and the sick and the lame and bringing Lazarus of the 4 days back from the dead. So I think you're on to something there. And I think he seems to be contradicting himself early in the quote. He's got this opening sentence about men's minds are built in watertight compartments.
Yes.
But then the next sentence says, you have unholy entanglements and associations inevitably. Well, if they're watertight, why would there be inevitable entanglements? You see my problem with understanding him there?
Yes, although I think the unholy entanglements and associations are part of those are in watertight compartments.
Oh,
That's the way, so that, but we have to challenge the unholy entanglements and
right.
associations. Yeah.
And of course, James doesn't really say, hey, I know this because I did a study, a scientific study, and I did a poll of men, and yeah, their compartments are watertight, all right, baby. And then my grad student researchers in their white lab coats also found out there are unholy entanglements that we observed using our radical empiricism. See, I don't know where he's getting this stuff. He's supposed to be Mr. Science on wheels.
Yes.
And where's he getting this stuff?
Yeah.
But he says many other people have said this, so he's just assuming it. But he's supposed to be a scientist. You don't have to take what other people say as your starting point. So here, I would wish he would be a little more scientific. And then he talks about wicked this and wicked that. See, science doesn't really talk about wicked stuff. It's just trying, just the facts, ma'am, and just the facts, mister.
Yes, right.
So I don't know where he's getting all this wicked stuff and unholy. That seems to be more from a religious point of view rather than a
or a judgmental from a, I guess you could say, even from a philosophical point of view.
Right. What do you think about that last sentence? They get rid of the bold, but that last sentence could be a real doozy. The ecclesiastical spirit in general, so he's talking pretty broadly now, is the sum of these two spirits of dominion. So the ecclesiastical spirit, I think that's supposed to be a good thing, is the sum of two wicked things. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Well, how do you get, it's like two wrongs make a right here or something. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And again, he doesn't say because of X, Y, and Z. He doesn't really give an argument. He's just pronouncing on Mount William James. He's coming down from Mount William James. And he doesn't say, I just did a study and I found this out. He's just pontificating, I think.
Yes.
Of course, if I read the whole lectures, maybe he's got some kind of scientific substance to it. I don't know. I'll have to double check. It's after 6. You want to do one more, or you want to call it a day?
Let's do one more. Do you have the energy for it?
Sure. I
can read this one. Shall I read this one? Or
yeah, that'll help with my energy problem here. I played 2 games of pickleball. And I'd never played pickleball before, and I didn't stretch or warm up or anything.
Oh my God!
Professional development day to teach us how to play pickleball. So I said that sounds pretty fun. So I probably ended up getting sunburned, and my muscles will be all sore in the morning. But yeah, so yeah, why don't you save me a little bit of energy by reading this next one?
Okay.
Please.
This practically amounts to saying that much that it is legitimate to admire in this field need nevertheless not to be imitated, and that religious phenomena, like all other human phenomena, are subject to the law of the golden mean. political reformers accomplished their successive tasks in the history of nations by being blind for the time to other causes. Great schools of artwork, out of the effects which it is their mission to reveal, at the cost of a one-sided for which other schools must make amends. We accepted John Howard, a Mazzini, a Botticelli, a Michelangelo, with a kind of indulgence. We are glad they existed to show us that way, but we are glad there are also other ways of seeing and taking life. So many of the saints we have looked at, of many of the saints we have looked at. We are proud of a human nature that could be so passionately extreme, but we shrink from advising others to follow the example.
So yeah, would you want people generally to be like Saint Teresa of Avila and try to get visions? And what if everybody did that?
Yeah.
Might be too much. But the golden mean, he doesn't seem to mean the golden rule, does he?
No, I think he means the average,
Yeah,
the
be
golden
moderate. It's like Aristotle's golden mean, that you want to
yeah.
not too much and not too little. You'd be like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You want your porridge just right. And so right in the middle there. So these saints were happy that we produced them, but we don't want everybody. It's like being the astronauts supposedly had the right stuff back in the 60s. The astronauts had the right stuff, but you don't want everybody to try out to be an astronaut. We don't need that many astronauts.
No. Yes.
We'd lose a lot of doctors and lawyers and sanitation engineers and soldiers if everybody went out to be a astronaut. They'd all be flying around in space, and there'd be a lot of stuff left undone down here. But we're proud of the astronauts, that we produce
Yes, absolutely.
a good crop of people. We got 18 in the Artemis program, and it's much more multicolored. And they're going to put a woman on the moon. In fact, on Monday, it's supposed to take off on the 29th. The uncrewed Artemis 1, biggest rocket ever launched, will be launched towards the moon. It will fly further than any other human-rated spacecraft has flown. Human-rated means it's fit for human beings to survive in. And but then eventually they're hoping to put the first woman on the moon and the first person of color on the moon.
My.
And there'd be four astronauts can be taken in the current version. It used to be 3, and then only 2 would actually land on the moon in the Apollo program. Artemis is the sister of Apollo. So
yes,
that's why
yes.
In Greek mythology.
Right, yes.
So I think James may be right on this one. What do you think?
I think so, yes.
Well, that's a good way to end our
Yes.
Our 5, where we actually, hey, this guy we're spending a month talking about, it's actually not that bad. So not totally wasting your time.
Right on.
It's been 3 weeks, actually. It'll be a month next week.
Yes.
So more than a fortnight. We finally got 1 or 2 of them we can agree with him on.
Yes.
So let me see real quick where we still have 14 and 15. And then so we're slightly behind. We got a couple of more on 14 and 15 before we get to 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So but it jumps to 19. So I think we're going to catch up fine because it goes to 19. And then 20 is on the conclusions. And I thought we had mysticism to deal with in here somewhere too, don't we?
Yes, there is, but he doesn't have very much to say about it.
Yeah.
Chapters, lectures 16 and 17, but he doesn't have very many quotes.
Yeah, maybe. And then he does talk about Buddhism and Stoicism for week. So let's try to finish them all off next week. But if we can't
All right.
do it, it's better that we go through them thoroughly than that we
Yes,
run
right.
around like bunny rabbits and try to touch every carrot in the field.
Yes, and he doesn't have quotes here from 19.
Yeah.
And there are just a few on mysticism. So I think we'll do all right.
Yeah. So if you want more mysticism, bring your own quotes and I can bring a few. But it looks like we got our work cut out. And then if you wanted to follow through on that original plan of going back over the first week's quotes to see if we changed our mind about them at all, we could leave a little time at the end for that. We don't have to do all of them, but we might do one or two to see if we've changed our mind. So you might look at those first quotes that
I will.
and then we'll see if the process of going through this seminar has led us to change our minds at all.
Okay, good.
Because it'd be useful to see if we actually made progress, or maybe it's a regress, but at least some kind of change, presumably a little bit of progress.
Yes.
Okay, well, good to see you.
Same
I'll see you
here.
next week for
Thanks
5
so
of
much.
5.
I'll see you next Friday at 9.
That sounds good.
Okay.
See you then.
Thanks a million.
Bye-bye. Thanks. You're welcome.